Hello, Muskegon. Welcome to Torn Into. I'm your host, Gregory T. Roberts. It is January 22nd, 2021. It is 20 degrees outside, some flurries. Not too bad. Is Michigan weather. The title of the show today is the vaccine. Let's talk about the vaccine. I want to thank you guys, the listeners of this program that listen on 103.7 and MO 106. You also can watch the show on our Facebook page, WVS 103.7 The Beat on Facebook. And that way you can add questions as you leisure. A couple things that I have to say, and then we'll get into the news. No top 10 today. I want to really thank you guys because it was August 21st when we started our first program. And because of you listeners, you faithful listeners and watchers, we want to thank you guys. So we're celebrating 5 months. We have not missed a week other than the Christmas and the holidays. And you guys even let me have my birthday off. But the guy that I'm getting ready to introduce now took care of that day. He's going to co-host with me today. I have him on the show a lot, and we talk politics often. Please welcome to the show with me, Pastor Melvin Burns II. How you doing, sir?
I'm good, Brother Roberts. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, man. Since you and I were on, a lot of things have changed. Of course, we have a new president.
Yes,
the 46th president, Joseph R. Biden Jr., and the first black woman, black South Asian, 49th Vice President Kamala D. Harris, is the vice president. Today we're going to be talking all things COVID and vaccines and stuff like that, and we're just waiting for our guests to come in. But I was talking to you, and I guess since we got some time, I have to say this real quickly. I don't care if you have an R behind your name, a D behind your name, an I behind your name, or you're a Trumper or a T behind your name, or whatever. Let's break this thing down and make this a little simple. Okay? They all work for us. They all, let me say that again. They all work for us. And guess what they're doing already? It's a new year. We have a new president. We have a new vice president. We have everybody's been sworn in the House and Senate. And guess what? They're fighting already. They're gridlock already. Now, if you would stop getting your news on unreliable places, stop copy and pasting other people think they work for us. Stop staying on that one side and believing that one side. I'm going to believe everything that the Democrats say. I'm going to believe everything that the Republicans, the Independents, the Trumpers say, and start holding them accountable. We are in a pandemic. People are hurting. This is not a farce. And they are already tying up Congress. And I want to say this to you as well. If I sat up in here and said my name was Joe Smith, and you know that my name is Gregory Roberts, I lied. Okay? If I lied, call it what it is. Call balls and strikes. And we have seen since the insurrection a couple weeks ago that people who said stuff on the floor of the House and Senate are all of a sudden changing their content and changing the things that they said. And people, it is time for us to bring it back together, get us back together. Regardless if you love it, you hate it, you don't like the president, you do like the president, it's one country. It's one country, and we're going to have to work this out together. I just need you guys to sit on that for a second, because what's happening is that we're still fighting. And the thing is that we have a fresh new chance. Our past the 45th president, Donald Trump, is in Florida. And now we have Joseph Biden as the president. For some of you people that say that he's not your president, I want you to think of something like this. When Trump won, a couple in 2016, a lot of you said he's not your president. Well, wait a minute, hold on. In this United States, in this republic, it's like this. I'll give you an example. If you're on a cruise ship or on a plane and you're having a bumpy ride and you want, all of a sudden things are going rough and you want the pilot to fail. No, we want our president to be successful. And how do we, regardless if that person is against our party or whatever, we hold our congressman, we hold our president, we hold people accountable when we voice our concerns. Jack Page, love last week's comments. Information silo. Thank you very much, Jack Page. But people, listen. If we're going to take care of this, you can't be silent. You can't dig in. We're so dug in. When you have 150 million people voted last election, and people are still dug in. Stop it. And the thing is if you want this country to heal and move forward, what we need to do is exactly what I say, hold everybody accountable. Our guest today, I see all we need to do is get his picture and get Melvin in. And as soon as I see their face, we're going to get both of those guys in. We're going to talk about the virus today. The total of deaths at 404,689, and I'm going to get Melvin back in. Melvin, does that make sense to you about holding people accountable?
Yes, sir. In all aspects of life. And I apologize for jumping out for a minute. We're trying to get our guest in. Yes, and apologize if I didn't catch all of what you were, Greg, but our actions, what we did, it didn't do. You can't, I always give this example, well, I'll come back to that, but you can't, okay, well, that's it, let's go. People have to be accountable for what they do. We're the same. It's funny, we're going to talk about politics, what happens in Capitol Hill, even when we talk about COVID-19. We have some personal responsibility. We got accountability to our family. We got accountability to a bigger society. And you can't just throw away one and think it doesn't affect the other. And so the same way, people want to do things politically and say, well, that's just me. No, it affects everybody. Well, your inaction affects everybody. As we get to the discussion about COVID, it's the same thing. You can't just say, well, this is just me and what I want to do. It affects other people, and we're accountable for our actions and the effects they have on other people.
That's right. I'm going to click on this link and see if the doctor's there. If it's not, then we're going to work on that. Dr. Jeffrey Sterling, are you there? There he is.
Of course I'm here.
Melvin Burris, will you introduce our guest today?
Yes. Now I should let everyone know I have our guest personally, but I met him a few years ago on a site. We're members of the same fraternity, Alpha Phi Alpha, which probably shouldn't come as a surprise. He's a medical doctor. He's an author. He's a speaker. He's engaged in a number of public health issues. Over the past year or so, I've found his advice, his analysis invaluable, particularly with COVID, but I've actually followed him for a few years on a couple other health issues, some of those particularly related to African Americans. So I found his counsel reliable, and I think for our audience, Greg, we have a unique opportunity. I know he had to move some things around his schedule to be with us today, but I think we have a unique opportunity to sort of have him educate us and enlighten us today. So Dr. Sterling, we're glad to have you, brother.
It's good to be with you. Let's get it in.
All right.
Dr. Sterling, Greg Roberts here. Nice to meet you. We're going to do, this is going to be where we not throw so many questions at you. We want you to educate us on the knowledge that you have. And so Melvin and I have discussed how we're going to attack this program. We want to thank you for being here. And can you tell the people a little bit about your history, and let's get into the show.
Yeah, we could be doing this all day, but I'll just give you enough to bite off of. I'm a physician, I'm a public health professional, I'm a healthcare entrepreneur. I run businesses globally and do whatever is necessary to impact the health and well-being of global communities, obviously focusing on communities of color, or specifically the African American community. I'm an emergency physician trained, but let's get into it. This isn't about me. This is about you guys. I can talk about things that I do, and you'd find it interesting forever.
All right, Dr. Sterling, the title of the show today is Let's Talk About Vaccines. So this country has a problem. Why don't you just start from the beginning when it comes down when COVID and who's it affecting, and then how are these vaccines, could these vaccines help us, the fears that we have as African Americans, and what do we need to break down? So there's so much that we need to talk about.
Yeah, well, since this is my dime, I'm going to do some checking. And if you ask me bad questions, I'm going to make sure that we redirect the questions to the conversation that we need to be having. Let's just get this on Front Street. Vaccines are a means to an end. They're not a panacea. It's not the cure-all. And I don't want people to deal with that. We have a lot more power independent of vaccines. So I'm going to throw that out there as a little bit of a teaser. And then we're going to circle back to that consideration. The long and short of it is that this is a virus that more or less had been inhabiting animals, and in a medical miracle, it actually managed to hop across species into humans over in China, and due to travel considerations, it subsequently populated the world. Contrary to the protestations of the prior president, what ended up affecting us in the United States really didn't come from China, but came to us through Europe. There's about 6 different strains that have been identified, and there's a couple more that are about to be named. But the strain that got to us here in the United States really came to us through travel between the United States and Europe. So that's a little bit of background that people should know. This whole xenophobic China virus thing is just another of many distractions that have been put into the air. Next thing is that this virus, contrary to what you think, is not a respiratory virus, meaning that it's not like the flu or like the common cold. As a matter of fact, it is a cousin of the common cold. But in general, viruses, we have a hard time with viruses, whether it's the common cold, HIV, or something like COVID-19. We can't treat effectively these things because they don't work. Antibiotics don't work against them. This is part of why your doctor's been hitting you over the head for years and years every time you get a cold and you ask your doctor for a Z-Pack. Well, Z-Packs don't work. They treat bacterial infections. This is a virus. It's a different thing altogether. So it came over and it spreads in the same way that the common cold spreads. And the respiratory point that I made before was that respiratory contraction of the virus is a means to an end. So we inhale it. We get it by inappropriately touching our eyes, nose, and putting our hands in our mouth, all of which are things that are nasty. And if your mother taught you appropriately, you wouldn't be doing as much as we tend to do them, but that's a different conversation. All respect to our moms. The the long and short of it is that even though the respiratory tract is the portal by which we get the disease is actually better described as an inflammatory disease. So once you get it, by whichever means you get it, it has nothing better to do than poke on the fence and try to find what it can wreak havoc in. And whether it's your brain, your heart, your kidneys, your lung, or your blood vessels in general, it has devastating effects that occur all throughout the body, and it's causing massive inflammation, and it's causing massive immune responses in which the body is trying to attack the virus, but in doing so, it may actually damage some of the good cells. So this, in other words, this thing is a mess. And all of that is meant to say, instead of us talking about a vaccine, the correct first part of the conversation to have is, how can I avoid this thing from Jump Street?
Okay.
Any conversation other than how can I avoid this vaccine from the beginning is really, look, it's the wrong conversation. And that's why this whole nonsense with people wearing masks is just so stupid. Again, if you're my patient and I'm seeing you in the emergency department, I'm going to be as polite and professional as I need be. But today, we're just going to have some real talk, okay? We're going to do some straight no chaser.
That's exactly what we want.
Well, that's what you're going to get. So I'm glad we're on the same page, my brothers. So the long and short of it here is that, I mean, imagine, if you will, how incompetent do you have to be to have 400,000 deaths when all you really need to create a different pathway for all of these avoidable deaths would have been just to put on a mask, wash your hands, promptly get tested so that you aren't infecting everybody else around you, and maintain 6 feet of distance. I mean, seriously, that's what we're talking about. And we have been so selfish as a nation and so lazy and lousy at doing these basic things that 400,000 of our countrymen and women have died. It's ridiculous. So the truth of the matter is, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. We learned that forever ago. And that has never been proven to be the case more than this. So the United States now is in a situation where it has endured 20 to 25% of all of the cases and all of the deaths that have occurred in the entire God's given world. This is just beyond ridiculous. So all of that said, now here we are chasing our tail, being distracted by anything and everything other than the most fundamental of conversations and considerations, which is that the best way to beat this thing, think globally, act locally, is to simply not get it. It's not that hard. Now, I want you to remember before you guys go off on that point, remember that physicians like myself walk into hospitals all day, every day, where this disease and many others like it have been there forever. I've been an emergency physician for over 25 years. I've never caught any of these diseases. And that means to say that if you successfully implement public health best practices, you can navigate these things. So I'm exposed all the time. So if I can do it, actually being confronted with the disease, you can do it as well. And I'm just going to give you a little take-home message. I'll scatter a few of these in along the way. Anytime you cannot socially distance, meaning staying within 6 feet of the person that's around you, you need to have on a mask. No equivocation, no exceptions. Don't even ask me about the exceptions. I said what I said. Anytime you cannot be outside of 6 feet of somebody, you need to have on a mask. Point blank, period. Okay? Yes, I'm talking about your honeys. Yes, I'm talking about kids. Yes, I'm talking about your mom. Yes. Okay? But we don't have to go there. And all the rest of this, if you just did that thing, so much of the rest of this would take care of itself. Wash your hands before you touch whatever it is you're touching, and wash your hands after you've touched whatever it is you've touched. If you know that you've been out there in the real world and you've gathered yourself in exposure, then make sure you're being clean and taking care of yourself. If you've been around somebody who's high risk or that you discover has gotten it, you know what to do. We've talked about quarantining and sheltering in place and going to get a test. Now, once again, we know what to do. The problem is, how good are we at implementing these simple things? Because it's all in implementation. It's not knowing what to do. It's, are you actually doing the things that need to be done?
Okay.
So that's the conversation that we need to be having. And if you simply look at best practices from around the world, American, in this example, American asceticism has been a bad thing. If you look at countries around the world that have implemented these very basic things, because there are a lot of poor countries. They don't have money to be throwing around talking about vaccines and monoclonal antibodies and all these crazy medicines that raise stock prices but don't actually work. No, they are producing better outcomes than the United States because they are doing a better job of implementing these very simple, fundamental, cost-effective best practices.
Right.
You with me?
Right. With you. Now,
all right, y'all need to get in because I'm gonna keep going.
No. I do want to get in. I want to, because I hear this all the time. Is that people said that, and it drives me nuts, is that we should have had herd immunity, that we should have just at the beginning, just let it run its course, and it would have been over. And number one, and number two, the people that say it's
no. Number one, who told you that?
Man,
no, stop. Who told you that?
Dr. Sterling, I am telling you, I hear that all the time, and it drives me nuts. And I want to make it clear.
Let me help you out with that one. Okay, so President Trump actually grabbed a hold of some guy from California, Stanford. Actually, I stopped calling guys to go to good school smart. I just say that they were theoretically well educated. So in any event, this guy who actually went to Stanford, who is a radiologist with no infectious disease training whatsoever, actually furthered this nonsense about herd immunity. Let me break down for you, your audience, what that actually means, because I'm going to tell you what it is you meant to say and what it is you could have been thinking that actually would have made sense instead of bastardizing it into something that makes no sense whatsoever. Okay, so stay with me on this one. Here comes another rant. The herd immunity is a concept that is applied in a completely different scenario. It is an after the fact consideration. It is an after the fact observation based on a simple premise. There are certain individuals, be it because they are literally allergic to vaccines or have an immune status such that they are at special risk, that they cannot do many of the best practices that are necessary to protect themselves, including, for example, getting a vaccine. In that example, public health professionals, epidemiologists, etc., have analyzed what would be necessary for them to be appropriately protected. And the truth of the matter is that we know that if 70% of the population has developed sufficient antibodies to the virus, either through vaccination, which is what we traditionally discuss this in the context of, or by having had the disease, then that reduces the bolus. Listen to me now. That sufficiently reduces the bolus of the disease and the virus in the population. So the probability of any one individual getting it is markedly reduced. That's what herd immunity is. You're not immune at all. You're just markedly less likely to see it because everybody else has already had it or already else has been vaccinated to it, such that under either of those two scenarios, everybody has sufficient antibodies, so the vaccine is going to die off or wither away. Now, that conversation occurs in childhood diseases that are not murderous. Okay, so let's just say, for example, chickenpox is the type of thing that back in the day you used to grab your kid, and when somebody in the community had chickenpox, everybody in the neighborhood would go grab their kid and literally put them in the face of the person that had chickenpox as a means of getting it in and out of the population as rapidly as possible. Remember that? You're aging yourself if you do. But in any event, what we have never done before now is said that, hey, we are going to kill 2 to 3 million citizens by extending that analogy, by putting the disease, and a deadly disease, I should say, in the face of people. And that's what this policy was. This policy was saying that we're just going to let this thing run rampant through the community with its 1 to 2% death rate. And we're just going to kill enough people off until it just washes over the country, does what it does, and we don't have to be bothered with it again. That is not herd immunity. That is actually murder. and the blood is on the hand of the individuals that furthered this idea and allowed it to fester to the point to where we will see 500,000 deaths by next month. All right, you had a point number 2. Thank you for letting me go on that rant there. What you got?
No, you're speaking real good. I'm about ready to pass the plate. Keep on preaching.
Hey, let me jump in, Doc. Doc, I saw you posted the one when you had looked over the you had read over the Biden plan for dealing with COVID. If they put you in charge, and I know there's some competent people in charge, but you reviewed that plan. We know where we are now, heading toward over 400,000 deaths. What things, if we merge our political show here with the health aspect, what do we need to do going forward, not just vaccine-wise, but as you've educated us with dealing with this whole pandemic, what are the things from a public health national perspective we need to be doing? Well, in addition to having a strategy.
Man, you already know the answer to that question because you've been following me since the beginning of this thing. Look, the reason why I was able to read those 200 pages in about an hour is because those are the exact same things that I've been talking about since March. See, the thing about public health best practices is that they already exist. In medicine, cheating is good. If you already know what to do, then you grab those public health best practices and you just implement them. So there is absolutely nothing new in Biden's plan. It is the same plan that should have been offered back in January, February, and March. It is the same thing that public health professionals like myself have been advocating since January, February, and March. And it's to our credit that on day 2 of his administration, he was actually able to spit it out because it's just cheating. He just grabbed his political experts like myself and said, hey, give me 7 things I need to tell everybody to represent a comprehensive approach to this thing. Boom, whoop, there it is. So the answer to your question in terms of what is it that you should be doing, I already told you. Wash your hands. Stay outside of 6 feet of the person in front of you and make sure you don't engage with people for 15 minutes at a time. That's what's called a significant exposure. Somebody within 6 feet of you for a 15-minute period of time, independent of them coughing, sneezing, or otherwise breathing on you to cause an immediate transfer of a viral load. So I've already told you what things you should be doing to protect yourselves and to reduce your risk of getting the vaccine. Now, I need to pause for a second because that's another important concept for you guys to get your arms around. None of this is anything other than reducing your risk. Diseases are expressions of risk. So again, we used to always talk about the birth control pill and how it would be 99% effective. What does 99% effective mean? It means that 1 out of 100 times, people that actually do the right thing are still going to get pregnant, the disorder in question, right? So when you take that and multiply it times 300 or hundreds of millions of people, there's still going to be tons of people that actually end up with the condition that you're trying to avoid. So the point of the matter is that by reducing your risk, it's kind of like playing the lottery. You buy 1 ticket. Well, actually, it's like the lottery in reverse. If you buy 1 ticket, you really don't have a chance of winning. You buy 100 million lottery tickets, then you actually have a very good chance of winning. So all of that is to say, if you engage in risky behaviors, you would have a risk profile that increases your risk of getting the disease. If you take part in these best practices and reduce your risk, you are much likely to be safer. And that's important to point out because, you know, the social media and all the disinformation, misinformation that it brings loves to jump on the exception and not the rule. Oh, there was 1 doctor that got infected. How is that possible? Oh, there was somebody that just got infected after taking the vaccine. How is that possible? You know, so again, diseases and disorders are expressions of risk. It's just a matter of what you can do to reduce that risk to give yourself the best chance of making it through to the other side without having caught the disease.
Doctor, describe a day of you going into the hospital. I say, describe, because you're there. Describe you going into the hospital and working every day and dealing with this.
Well, I'm actually in multiple different hospital settings. One of the things that I do is actually manage, have what's called a contract management company where I oversee the activity of dozens and dozens of physicians who staff hospital emergency departments. So we do that in BIC. trauma centers. We do that in small community hospitals and surgical hospitals, many different types of settings. And it's all the same. You may not want to believe this, but it's actually true. This is only impressive in its magnitude because for the last 25 years professionally, there's always something that's trying to kill you. Hell, influenza kills 35 to 75,000 people a year. You have meningitis that's out there. You have pneumonia that's out there. You have had tuberculosis that's out there. You've had the respiratory complications of HIV. There's always diseases that are trying to kill you. And so when you walk into an emergency department or you walk into a hospital to treat patients, that's why some physicians don't want to shake your hand, because that's where the diseases are. We know how nasty people are. You don't wash your hands, you go, anyway, I won't get on that rant. Don't eat the beer nuts. I'll just stop there. But the point to be made is that all of that means knowledge is health. So, you know, as a physician, I'm going into war with my armor all the way on. So it takes an idiot. You know, I really don't like people that have to learn by experience. So if you're telling me that you have to wait until the fire burns your hand until you come get a clue that that fire was hot, you're not my kind of guy. I like the kind of people that realize that there's a threat out there and appropriately protect themselves proactively. And that's what we do in hospitals. So your question about what do hospitals look like? Well, they look like people that take care of patients who are smart enough to protect themselves. And all too often, I'm not going to be condescending or disrespectful, but all too often, especially in an emergency department, people that show up in an emergency department way too often suffer from the consequences of their own actions. They eat too much and have heart attacks. They drink too much and have liver disease from alcoholism. They beat up on each other too much. They're victims of trauma and shootings. They don't appropriately protect themselves and come in with sexually transmitted diseases. And in this example, they didn't protect themselves from respiratory diseases, and they come in with the flu or something like COVID-19. Well, that's what hospitals look like. They look like people that are protecting themselves and being sacrificial in a way to try to care for you. And too often they are dealing with people that are suffering the consequences of their actions, or being more magnanimous about it, looking at people who are expressing the consequences of their risk profile. Now, unfortunately, in this example, that is so severe that hospital beds are filled, so much so that people with normal diseases, heart attacks, strokes, and other things that warrant hospitalization can't even get hospital beds because the hospitals are filled to the gill. And yes, there are people who are dying. Yes, these, what did Sarah Palin talk about back in the day? Death panels. Real decisions are being made, even with COVID-19 patients. Even with COVID-19 patients, patients who meet the medical indication for being hospitalized are being sent home very often because there just aren't enough hospital beds to care for everyone who has this disease and all the other diseases that exist out in the community. Not a good look.
Let me throw this at you, because some of the crazy things that I hear they're mixing in the numbers. They're mixing in the flu numbers with the COVID numbers and all that kind of stuff. Doctor, I hear a lot of this stuff. Would you put that to rest, that this is not what these people and these individuals are talking about?
Yeah, but once again, that's a distraction, and that's going to ring in your ear after we get done today. Stop being distracted. Who cares what kills you? If you die from the flu, are you going to get a cookie because it wasn't COVID-19? The long and short of it is that there are dozens of things that we need to be worried about. We need to do a better job of health prevention and health promotion such that we aren't dying. Now, as luck would have it, there are very similar circumstances that allow respiratory diseases, whatever they are, whether it's pneumonia or influenza or COVID-19 or many other types of diseases. If somebody's in your face coughing, sneezing, hacking, or doing whatever the case may be, you're subject to whatever they're carrying at any point in time. So that's a distinction without a difference. Now, of course, on my end, we care what the difference is because we're going to try to treat you, save your life, and prevent you from dying. But as far as you're concerned, your goal really is to be empowered. We need you to be a better steward of your own health care and to do the things that you can do to reduce your risk so that you don't die from a heart attack or a stroke, that you don't get stabbed or shot, and that you don't die from a preventable respiratory disease.
Please, doctor, I don't mean I need to interrupt you. Can you please say this again, because to just make it clear in people's head what you just said?
Well, I can never say the same thing twice because I get on a rant and I get going, but I'll let you know what I meant to say.
Just tell them. Just keep on telling the truth.
We are better stewards. We need to become empowered. We need to be better stewards of our own healthcare. Think about this. This is so stupid. And again, I'm saying that flippantly, but I'm very serious when I say this. You see your primary care physician one day a year, twice at best, unless you're sick. Are you kidding me? That is not healthcare. What are you supposed to do those other 364 days of the rest of the year? You have to learn how to care for yourself. You have to be a better steward of your own healthcare. You have to be empowered. And as I said before, that falls into you've learned how to put on a seatbelt so you don't die from a car crash. You've learned not to hang around with certain type of people so you don't get stabbed or shot. This is no different. Put on a mask. Do what you need to do so that you don't fall prey to a respiratory disease. And by the way, the flu and COVID both are trying to kill you. Let there be no doubt. These viruses have nothing else in their lives to do than to find a host to kill. You want to know how deep this is? Now, again, it's important for all of us to draw distinctions between influenza and COVID, but let's talk about the flu for a second. Did you guys ever hear about the flu pandemic in 1917 and 1918?
We've been going.
That's when the flu first came on the scene. You know how many people were? You know how many millions of people died around the world? How many? More than 10 million people. That's how bad influenza was back in the day. You hear me? And 100 years later, are you feeling me? 100 years later, the flu is still around, killing 30 to 75,000 people a year in the United States alone. That's how bad the flu is. We knocked it down from killing millions of people a year in that first pandemic, and there have been subsequent pandemics every 10 or so years, to where it is now. Why? Because we have flu vaccines that people don't want to take every year. And you hear the same nonsense about, oh, why am I taking the flu vaccine? Blah, blah, blah. Why are people, listen to me, but I'm going to talk about how that applies to the coronavirus in a second. One of the rules of emergency medicine that people would do well to incorporate into their lives is you never let a potential side effect get in the way of your dealing with a defined life threat.
Okay.
I'm gonna let you marinate on that for a second. And this is what you guys are doing. You guys are sitting here, and we need to flip the script and talk about vaccines, since I know that's what everybody wants to talk about. We had about 20 minutes left. But check this out. People are sitting around here. You don't know anybody. You don't know anybody that knows anybody, and you don't know anybody that knows anybody that knows anybody who's died from a vaccine. Period. Okay, I don't know anybody, and I'm a physician, been practicing for 25 years. And yet you want to sit here and have beef with something that is 95% effective against a disease that has taken out 400,000 Americans, 40% of which, I mean, come on. You expect me to have a serious conversation with somebody that's spouting that nonsense? Come on, now. Do not let a potential side effect get in the way of your addressing a defined life threat.
We're going to use that.
Let that be one of your take on messages.
Yeah. Before you go on the vaccines.
After all of that.
Okay. Before you go on the vaccines, how crazy was, as you said, we got to educate and take care of ourselves. How crazy was it to make this issue political when we could have do the simple things like you said, washing your hands, wearing a mask, social distancing? But an issue, how frustrating as a doctor is it when you hear all this nonsense?
Well, I mean, consider the source. I mean, if you're incompetent, what are you going to do? You know, he's not claiming his stuff. And let me tell you something. The day everything changed nationally was the day that they discovered who was actually dying disproportionately from this disease. Now, that's not a conspiracy theory. That's some real talk for you right there. When they discovered that it was largely elderly folks in nursing homes, and when they learned that it was a lot of African Americans and Latinos that were disproportionately dying from this disease, things changed. And the efforts and attention to it went away. Now, if you want to run that, this is a political show. If you want to run that through a political prism, what do those groups have in common? And if you're coming up on an election and somebody's telling you, hey, man, let this run rampant. Let's do this herd immunity thing. Let's let this run rampant through the population. You might kill off 2 or 3 million people that ain't going to vote for you. Now, I'm not saying that's what happened, but it kind of makes sense. Yeah. So as a health professional, as a public health professional, it's actually criminally negligent for that to occur. And it actually makes you wonder why politicians don't have some sense of criminal responsibility for the actions that they're taking. And people really should be asking those questions, because you know that had me or any of my colleagues done a single thing to a single patient that resulted in a death or even any type of disability, you all have been trying to sue us till the cows come home. And we're sitting here with 400,000 deaths and nobody's being held accountable for that. No, that's not a good thing at all.
Right. Now you just to let you know, because we have notes and stuff like that of people that send in their questions. We got people even saying that what you're saying is dong. Just to let you know that this is what we're dealing with.
But they're saying, well, hold up. They're saying I'm wrong.
It has the dong emoji. A lot of them.
You broke up. Hey, look, anybody that's saying I'm wrong, let them throw their medical degree up here and whatever. I'm not here to debate anybody. I'm actually here dropping knowledge. And the truth of the matter is that God bless you. I love you. I actually exist to try to provide you with information. I have no personal agenda in any of this other than taking care of my community. So part of what my message to you is, if you walk down the street and see a dollar line on the floor, may God give you the good sense to pick up that dollar instead of being the type that walks past the dollar and say, what is that? So again, my goal for you guys is that you become empowered to make the best decisions for your own health. You get to choose. I have no inclination to try to force you to do anything. Yeah. But if you think that I'm actually wrong about anything that I've just said, and you don't have a license to practice medicine, or you're not a public health professional, or you don't do the things that I've done all over the world, you need to have a seat. Okay. And you need to break yourself down a little bit and just sit down and learn. You can ask questions, but the stuff that I'm talking about is not debatable. And I'm not going to debate it with you. And the point of the matter is that you can just simply keep scrolling or keep it moving and do whatever you feel is best for you. And I will be rooting for you. I want nothing more than for you to be empowered, but we are going to provide you with information and advice that represents only best practices in medicine, science, and public health. So you can go do whatever it is you want to do, but the information that I'm providing here, I literally would not be here at risk of my own standing, providing you with misinformation. So to those of you that think you know otherwise, God bless you, do what it is you want to do. I'm actually here providing information to those that are inclined to take information from a trusted source and do what they can to improve the health and life of their family. So let's keep it moving.
Now, you gave people very simple things that they can do that they can protect their health. You've told people that they need to educate themselves and that they need to be smart. Now, what about those people that are just, waiting for a vaccine? Because we have a lot of people that the vaccine is a cure-all. It's the silver bullet, the magic bullet, but they won't put on a mask.
Well, I mean, whatever. All of this is about risk reduction. You can reduce your risk a certain amount by wearing a mask. If you, for whatever reason, can't or won't put on a mask, you can reduce your risk by getting a vaccine. If you are doing best practices, you will do all of the above. It's not an either or. Now, let's talk about the vaccines for a second, because I want to double back and point out to everybody who's listening here that the right conversation to be having about vaccines is actually very simple. Anybody who is in a community of color, anybody who is immunocompromised or suffers from certain comorbidities, anyone who is elderly and certainly institutionalized, and that includes jail as well as nursing homes, assisted living facilities, you need to be forcing your way to the front of the line as quickly as you can get it. Let me be clear about that. The 2 American vaccines have a 95% success rate in reducing contraction of this virus. The other ones that exist around the world, there's one in China that's at about 70%. There's one in Oxford that's at about 80%. The 2 American vaccines are literally as good as it's going to get. And yes, we, instead of, or in addition to expressing legitimate concerns, we need to avoid the urge to let irrational fears paralyze us from doing what is actually in our best interest. So many in our community mocked people who were COVID deniers or who didn't want to put on masks. Let's not fall into a trap where we subsequently become mocked for being vaccine deniers. The truth of the matter is that there are a whole lot of people that are very okay with the African American community saying, nah, I remember Tuskegee, nah, I remember Henrietta Lacks, I'm not going to get that vaccine. And then we get involved in this groupthink. And those people, there are other groups that are happy to take our place in line and get that 95% effective solution, while here we are already disproportionately being affected in deaths and number of cases because we are frontline workers. We have essential jobs. We have to take public transportation more often. There are so many reasons why this disproportionately affects African Americans. And with all of that in mind, for us then to close the door in front of our faces and to say that we aren't going to get the vaccine, that's a bridge too far. And we really have to compel each other, as is the case today. Ask questions. Bring your legitimate concerns. Do not take no for an answer. If you don't like the way that even myself am expressing this information to you, continue to ask questions. It is in your interest to challenge authority, but not to reject facts. Okay? If I have not answered a question for you in the way that you find satisfying, dig deeper. What you cannot do, what you should not do, is be disillusioned. Okay? That's to your detriment. I'm gonna be okay when this is over. I've already been vaccinated. But what you can't do is say that your dislike for anybody that's providing information to you means that, oh, I'm not going to get the vaccine. I heard this guy who was a jerk who said this, that, or the other. The goal is for you and your families to be safe. So you have to do whatever it is you need to do to get accurate information. And then you are empowered to do what you feel is in the best interest of your health and your family's health. So that's the approach. But what I'm sitting here telling you is that the science and the facts of the matter actually say that this community should be running to the front of the line. As soon as you can get a vaccine, you need to get it. And you need to be trying to force your way to the front of the line to see how quickly you can get a vaccine.
Right.
As luck would have it, I know a whole lot of people that didn't meet any of the criteria who were able to get vaccinated simply because they made phone calls and because of the disorganization of how the distribution networks were put in place. They called their local public health department and it's like, yeah, we're giving away immunizations to whoever shows up today between 9 and 5 until we run out. People are getting vaccinated. And that should be the case for all of us because we are the ones being disproportionately affected by it all. So the vaccine is a good thing. And I don't want to overstate the other points, but anytime you get into a conversation about therapeutics and medicines, that's the end of the conversation. The better part of the conversation is always going to be health prevention. And the best way to engage in prevention isn't to get a vaccine, is actually to avoid the disease and to protect yourself up front. And we have very effective public health ways that we know how to do that. So all in total, yes, start by prevention and protection, and then you can take some medicinals like vitamin C and zinc along the way to further reduce your risk and get tested promptly. And then when the vaccine comes around, make sure you promptly get the vaccine. So there's a continuum along those lines, but please don't think that any one of those choices is the end all be all in totality, what's going to prevent you from getting sick. And besides, remember, there are going to be people that have done all of those things and who still get sick because it is still expression of risk. your best odds are that if you do all of those things, it's not going to happen. But there are no guarantees here.
Destin, I want to thank you for your comments. Remember, you're watching Touring It Too with Dr. Jeffrey Sterling, and we're talking about the vaccine and talking about health. You brought up a very interesting thing about only seeing your doctor twice a year. What should we be doing when it comes down to health?
Unfortunately, once again, that presumes that you have health care. And African Americans, let's just talk about our community. Our community has an ungodly higher unemployment rate than the general population, which means that if our employers are the ones in the United States that are providing the bulk of insurance, simply put, if you're employed, you're more likely to have health insurance. If you're not employed, you're not likely to have health insurance. So all of that is to say that start the conversation by making sure you have those 1 or 2 physician visits. Just make sure that you optimize those visits to prepare you for what needs to occur in between your physician visits. Make sure that you ask the right questions. If you follow my blog or if you go to our website, we talk about the types of things, the types of questions you should be asking your primary care physician. This is really, it has so little to do with us. The goal here, guys, is really to empower you, to stop you from looking at bad Google sites. Now, just because it's on the internet doesn't mean it's good information, but there is good information on the internet. And if you learn how to navigate those sites to empower yourself, if you become a discerning reader of this information, all you really have to do is you just go to sites like the CDC website or the World Health Organization website or web.com or, my site, Jeffrey Sterling MD. I have over 2,000 blogs, and you just type any question you have in there, and there will be blogs. We're into providing you with information and advice. But at the end of all of this, you get to choose. This is about your health and empowering you to be better stewards of your health. So when you go to your doctor's visits, there's one blog you can look up that asks, what are the 10 questions I should ask my doctor? And that's a pretty good way to go. But just remember, don't do this. And too many of us do this. You go to your physician and they have 40 patients they're trying to see, and they're seeing 2 patients every 15 minutes. You go in, they spend 2 minutes with you. It's a completely rushed visit. They don't have time for you. You do not need to accept that. You don't have to accept that. You have to slow the process down, come in with your list of questions, get your questions answered. You have those rights and you deserve that. So make sure that you make your physician visits, whether it's in the hospital or in the emergency department, more meaningful and more beneficial to you. Because if you're only getting that one swing of the bat every 6 to 12 months, just try to make the most of it.
Wow. Pastor Melvin Burns, questions?
Hey, people used to listen to us. I wanted to sit back and let them listen to the doctor. So I just saw I'm sitting quiet. But Doc, you hit so many things. We probably have to, I know you're busy, but you've educated people just on health for our people in general. Just real quick, with the vaccine, is it performing the way anticipated it would? Are we any surprises since they've started inoculating people?
There are tons of surprises, and I expect it to be incredibly critical of this. I bought into the whole notion that vaccines historically took X number of years to develop, and the fact that this administration was the one champion that meant that it was going to be garbage in and garbage out. But check this out. Why do we accept technological innovations in automobiles and phones and other such things and eliminate the possibility of scientific technological advances? The truth of the matter is that the development of this vaccine was fast, but it was not rushed. It actually went through a process. You literally can't, ever since, and by the way, I know we don't have time to get into this, but one of the consequences, people should talk about this more. One of the consequences of Tuskegee, not what happened during Tuskegee, but one of the consequences of Tuskegee was that checks and balances were put in place such that that type of thing could never happen again. There are things that are called institutional review boards that govern how research has to happen, at risk of creating felonies and people going to jail, scientists and others who are trying to test things like vaccines. So all of those checks and balances were put in place. And without getting into climbing down the scientific rabbit hole here, This virus vaccine came about simply because of an expeditious scientific discovery that about 8 of the steps that has historically been thought to be necessary to get to step 10, actually, we found a way to do that so that you could immediately go to that point, and it worked just as well. So in this example, we have found a way to trigger the body's immune response to fight off these antibodies without taking 8 steps to do it. It literally just took the one presentation of that spike protein, which is not the virus, it's just a particle that triggers an immune response inside the body. And that really cleared away a whole lot of mess, so much so that I think that we will now have the reasonable expectation in the future that the new vaccines that become necessary with new disease should never again take as long as they had historically taken. So that was actually a very good thing and a very timely thing given the ravages of COVID-19 on the world.
Johnson and Johnson.
To your question, by the way, that was a very pleasant surprise.
Okay.
Johnson and Johnson is coming up about in a month. What are we hearing about their vaccine, percentage-wise? How is it going to do?
Well, Johnson and Johnson is it's a, they say never follow a better comedian or a better musician. Well, Johnson & Johnson appears like it's doing it because, the first one was Moderna, and Moderna came in strong, 95% success rate, but it had a problem. You had to have these super cold temperatures where in order to transfer it, you'd have to have these special refrigerators, and that would pose a problem if you're trying to get to rural communities in the middle of America, right, theoretically. Well, next up came Pfizer, and Pfizer is also at 95%, but you actually don't have to have those same type of refrigeration situations. You can have a normal refrigerator, keep it cold, and that helps penetrate some of these far-flung areas. But both of those two also had a different problem that's frustrating for a lot of people, myself included. You need 2 doses. In one example, those doses are spread apart 21 days, and in the other, it's 28 days. So there are opportunities for improvement. So now here comes J&J with their vaccine that's looking like it's going to be 95 to 97% effective, and it's only going to need 1 dose, and it's not going to require that level of refrigeration at all. So as soon as the dust gets cleared, and right now the delay is caused by the due diligence necessary to really vet the research. And if and as that occurs, I think a lot of people are going to be happy with the fact, this is a one and done. I can go get this 1 shot, and I'm not going to have to worry about whether or not it was stored correctly. And especially people that are, again, far away from major medical centers or major municipalities. And it can be transported out to those areas without it losing. Because one of the reason why it needs to be frozen in these super cold temperatures is that it's a very unstable particle. So when you unwrap it, so to speak, you literally only have about 1 or 2 hours before it denatures, before it dissolves, so to speak. And that's why it needs to be kept cold, because that preserves it. Well, in this situation with J&J, that's not going to be the case. So that's going to allow a lot more people not only to get it, but to get it in a way that is more pleasing. 1 shot instead of 2, and even a percentage point or so better vaccination than the rest. Good news.
Dr. Jeffrey, we got to wrap up the show here, but can you tell people how to contact you? And we want to let you know that you have an open invitation to come to the show anytime.
Thank you kindly. I appreciate that. Visit me at my website at jeffreysterlingmd.com, JeffreySterlingMD.com. You can reach me under that same name on Facebook, Jeffrey Sterling MD, where we've been having a national conversation on COVID-19 since March, and we haven't gotten anything wrong yet, and very proud of that. We have just hundreds of physicians, scientists, researchers, public health professionals that engaged in national conversations. All of your questions can be asked and verified. So if I say something that's wacky, one of my colleagues would come and check me immediately, because there's so many professionals, and I've been blessed to be allowed to have this national gathering of professionals from many walks of life to provide accurate information to members of the community. And you can find me on other social media channels at hashtag AskSterlingMD, ASK Sterling MD. And the take-home message for everybody is that Remember, you get to be empowered. That's the goal here. I'm not trying to force anything down anybody's throat here, figuratively speaking, of course. We want you to blend your quality of life with what will be your quantity of life, but you have to be educated. And the name of the game here is not opinions. Medicine isn't that. This isn't something that, if that was the case, physicians wouldn't have to go to 4 years of medical school and 3 to 5 years of additional residency training. Mm-hmm. You made my life possible so that I could double back to my community and provide the American community, as well as the African American community, accurate information to stave off some of the healthcare disparities that exist. And this is really about you guys. It's never about the ego. It shouldn't be about the ego of any of the physicians or other care providers that are taking care of you. So please get the information, do with it what you will. But in the meantime, I appreciate having the platform to discuss this with you. If you have any other questions, comments, or thoughts, feel free to reach out and share them. No one takes offense at your questions. There's really no such thing as a bad question. They're just bad choices that we make based on information that's available. So thanks again. I'll look forward to talking to you guys down the road.
Dr. Jeffrey Sterling, Pastor Melvin Burns, thank you so much for being on the show. Listen, you've been watching Torn in Two. I hope you received this information, because you received you received the truth today. Straight, no chaser. We'll see you next week on Torn in Two. Take care and God bless.
All right. Thanks a lot.
An unarmed African-American teenager was shot and killed by police in the St. Louis suburb of Ferguson,
latest on that police
Missouri.
killing of a black man in Atlanta, Rayshard Brooks.
It has happened again.
Shot in the back as he fled the scene after officers tried to arrest him.
New developments in 2 high-profile racially charged police shootings. We also know that young black men continue to be fatally shot by police in the United States, and they involve the deaths of 2 black men in separate incidents.
After the killing of a black man by an Atlanta police officer.
A fatal police shooting that...
Grand jury in New York City has refused to indict yet another white police officer said to have killed an unarmed black man.
I can't breathe. Breathe, man. Breathe, man.
Bro, you got him down, man. Let him breathe, at least, man.
I can't breathe. I can't breathe shit.
Go.
I can't move.
I've been waiting the whole time, man.
Get on the ground!
One of my homies died. Man. Went back home.
I'm about to die to see.
How many more of my family needs to be murdered before enough is enough?
It's never the wrong time to do the right thing.
How many weren't filmed?
We all bleed the same color. All lives can't matter until Black lives matter.
No one is free when others are oppressed.
Get to know me before you hate me.
I'm tired.